Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to participate in this afternoon's event. The event, as you know, was called to celebrate one of our own, Dr. Richard Byron-Cox. The celebration is for two things. One is that he was bestowed the honor of Author of the Year, another for Book of the Year, both for 2026. His book entitled The Story of Paulene Bramble made him famous in the eyes of the St. Vincent the Grenadines Artists, Writers, and Producers Association, which bestowed the honors I just mentioned. I offer sincerest congratulations to Richard for his accomplishments as a writer. I hasten to add my own reflection, and it is that I'm here because I value Richard's work. The sentiment is shared by three colleagues who I am working with tonight. Their regard for Richard's work is probably more well-informed and grounded, as they have been following Richard's writing more closely and longer than me. The colleagues I'm referring to are Mrs. Andrea Bowman, Dr. Cleve Scott, and Dr. Reynold Murray. I know them well, and they're all very special Vincentians. I can say a lot about them, which will make you feel puffy with pride. But I do not want to take your attention away from the man of the moment. But it is suffice to say, to repeat, that Andrea, Cleve, and Reynold make us feel good to be Vincentians. Besides, you know them well, and they prefer not to attract further attention from me by talking about them some more. There is a packed program coming on, and the first person we'd invite the head of the center for the UWI Center, Mrs. Reza Noel Barnwell, yes, to give welcoming remarks.
I almost got a new surname there. Thank you very much, Professor O'Garro. Thankfully, this is not being live streamed, so my husband didn't hear that, but that's okay. Distinguished guests, everyone, good evening. It is with immense pleasure that I greet you this evening here at the University of the West Indies Global Campus in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are gathered this evening to listen to and engage in thought-provoking discussions around the work of Dr. Richard Byron-Cox through the lenses of history, literature, philosophy, feminism, and religious faith. The texts under consideration are 1. Were Mammoth's Tears in Vain? 2. The Story of Paulene Bramble, Book 1, Springs, Blossoms, and Young Thorns, and 3. Living in Wisdom, an examination of human nature. I must extend gratitude to Dr. Byron-Cox for choosing the University of the West Indies Global Campus here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines as the venue for this worthwhile event. His event dovetails with our institution's commitment to academic discourse and community engagement. In April last year, Dr. Byron-Cox held readings from his work, The Story of Paulene Bramble, at this very site. As a former teacher of English language and literature and a holder of a bachelor's degree in literatures in English, I shared a brief analysis of that text against the backdrop of Caribbean literature. Please permit me to share a few insights from that evening. Dr. Byron-Cox. He masterfully utilizes familiar tropes of Caribbean writing. He employs the setting of the rum shop, for example, as a potent microcosm of the social, political, and cultural landscape, a place where characters grapple with their demons and confront uncomfortable truths. The rum shop becomes a space where characters like ghosts seek solace, attempting to, and I quote, drown his sorrows, end quote, after what we call in our local parlance, the boot. It is also where readers observe John V's guilt because of his reprehensible actions and Inez's outcry, which deeply haunts him. We also learn of his troubled childhood and a possible cycle of sexual trauma. Initially, I approached the novel with a degree of curiosity, wondering about the representation of women's experiences through a male author's lens. However, Dr. Byron-Cox's skillful use of the omniscient third-person narrative allows readers to observe the character's actions and motivations. The novel also explores the profound role of the spiritual Baptist religion as a space of belonging and acceptance, offering a sense of community and healing to characters like Mama Clarice. And she states it was, and I quote, that fellowship in church with them people who being black but really, really nice, and the love of me husband Gordon is what drive the craziness out of me, end quote. However, the novel also doesn't shy away from the underpinnings of race and class in post-colonial Caribbean society, highlighting the prejudice and social hierarchies that existed even within religious communities. For example, on page 282, and I quote, Mama Clarice was happy with her Baptist faith, even though all the whites on the island and the uppity blacks that followed the Methodist, Anglican, and Catholic faiths, the so-called established churches, deemed it a false religion. Many people also thought that the spiritual Baptists were practicing obeah, end quotes, even prompting questions about Mama Clarice's own racial identity, as highlighted in the phrase, woman of her color. I also noted the representation of mental illness, specifically the fragmentation of the female psyche in the face of trauma and sexual violence in the novel. Mama Clarice's reference to ending up in the mental home after the devastating loss of little Clara is just one poignant example of this. Various authors explore this theme, including Erna Brodbar, Jean Rees, Derek Walcott, and Earl Lovelace, who delve into the lives of characters on the edge, grappling with societal pressures and personal turmoil. The story of Pauline Bramble is a rich and layered novel, one that invites us to engage with complex themes such as identity, trauma, resilience, and the enduring power of community. And we see why Dr. Cox was bestowed the honor from the Vincentian Association of Writers, Authors, and Producers, Inc. in that award for Novel of the Year. So we give him another round of applause. I would like to take this occasion to place Dr. Byron-Cox's event within the context of our UWI Global Campus St. Vincent and the Grenadines site, which has a renowned history for either being chosen as an event venue, and I pause now to acknowledge the presence of the Leader of Opposition, our former Prime Minister, the Honorable Dr. Ralph E. Gonsalves, who is no stranger to this site. Welcome, Dr. Gonsalves. I start again. I would like to take this occasion to place Dr. Byron-Cox's event within the context of our UWI Global Campus St. Vincent and the Grenadines site, which has a renowned history for either being chosen as an event venue or for executing distinguished events of our own. And I'll just give you a few examples. The UWI Global Campus SVG, in collaboration with the Vincentian Association for Artists, Writers, and Producers, hosted the 7th edition of the annual literary fair and performing Arts Festival this month, March 9th to 11th, under the theme Echoes of Our Heritage, Roots, Rhythm, and Reels. This festival featured an opening ceremony, 3 book launches by Vincentian authors, Mrs. Nashida White Ballantyne, Mrs. Karen Charles Eferitus, and Mrs. Margaret Solin. We also held an evening of the arts where attendees experienced the pulsating rhythms of the drums, the elegance of the pan, dynamic dance performances, evocative poetry, immersive open-air theatrical production, and 3 short, thought-provoking Vincentian films contributed by the Hairuna Film Festival. We also featured an exhibition with Vincentian visual artists, writers, craft artisans, and local bookstores, and the Children's Village, which featured, and we had in attendance here over 200 students on our site, and we featured national writing competition winners, a talent showcase from our schools. The highlights of the program included a reading corner, literary and arts gallery, talent showcase, cultural performances, and the list goes on. We also held, we were the site for the Garifuna Heritage Foundation's 13th International Garifuna Conference, also held this month. And of course, last August 2025, as part of the National Emancipation Month celebrations, the volume one of the History of St. Vincent and the Grenadines was officially handed over to the government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines at this site. This seminal work was authored by 3 distinguished Vincentian historians, Dr. Adrian Fraser, Dr. Cleve Scott, and Dr. Gary Denny. The event also featured a lecture, Our Vincentian Civilization, Retrospect and Prospect, reflecting on the nation's journey and its vision for the future by former Prime Minister, Leader of the Opposition, the Honorable Dr. Ralph E. Gonsalves. And no, I did not know he was coming this evening, but coincidentally I wrote that. Then on March this year, of course, we had the official handover, the official launch of that same text right here again at this site. And of course, we have our quality continuing and professional education courses. We have also, in the spirit of our continuing studies, we have formal and non-formal education activities. Last October, we held our Independence Lecture. It was delivered by the Sir Dwight Venner Memorial Independence Lecture was delivered, of course, by retired President of the Caribbean Court of Justice, Adrian Saunders. And just last week, we had Professor Alison Raggi, a professor of arts and graduate studies, all the way from the California State University with us. So the point here is that we are a vibrant site. We have activities where we support our students, our annual on-site student orientation sessions. We have our Guild of Students that is very active in terms of its peer mentorship program and its annual honor roll recognition ceremony. So Dr. Cox, you are well placed in terms of your event this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I've taken up enough of your time. So as we embark on this journey of exploration and discussion this evening, I encourage everyone to actively participate in the discussions that will follow. It is essential that we engage respectfully and thoughtfully with one another. Thank you for listening, and God bless you all.
Yes. Thank you very much, Head. This time I'd just like to invite the man of the moment and the 3 panelists to take your seats. So I'll continue by just giving you an overview of this evening's proceedings. So it's back to the man of the moment. He will feature 3 published books, Our Mama Tears in Vain, The Story of Pauline Bramble, and Living in Wisdom, an examination of human nature. It is the story of Pauline Bramble which copped the prize of Book of the Year and made him Writer of the Year, as mentioned earlier. He will also grace us with reading excerpts from his books. Hopefully, he will bring his writings to life through his tone. Now, following the excerpts, the panelists have been given the task of teasing out the importance of Richard's work along the following lines. And I think you have this information on your program. 1, the history and philosophy, and that task will be taken on by Dr. Cleve Scott. The 2nd, the Vincentian literature and feminism by Mrs. Andrea Bowman. And 3rd, reflections of and on religious faith by Dr. Reynold Murray. Each panelist is eminently qualified on the basis of their own exemplary work in the corresponding fields. Next, I'm called upon to give my views on Richard, and I must tell you, I'm looking forward to that. The next instruction that has been given to me is to recall the panelists for discussion amongst themselves. They will have the opportunity to engage each other and to expand on their earlier presentations. After that, I will open the floor for contributions from the audience, and this will be followed by a book signing ceremony. Presumably, you'll have to purchase the book first. So I'll then call on the man of the moment to read us excerpts from his books.
Thank you very much, Distinguished Professor O'Garro. There's much to be thankful for, and I hope that our distinguished moderator will later sometime in the program, at the end of it, allow me to say thank you to you all. However, I must acknowledge the presence of my friend, a mentor, a senior teacher. As a 16-year-old boy, I scrunched him for a ride years ago. Dr. the Honorable Ralph Gonzalez. You know, so, comrade, thank you for coming. You know, I think I must say to you that I've always loved writing, but comrade would not remember this, but years ago I was in his office and he was talking to me and he said, Richard, you need to go beyond writing for the newspaper. You have something to say, say it. You're not going to be here forever. You don't remember that. As a matter of fact, I think comrade don't remember that, what we do, but this afternoon, as I said, I'll say my thank yous later. Now, I want to read not much from my work, but I think I ask you please to pay close attention. The reason for this, or the reasons for this are 2. Firstly, because what I read now relates to the different themes that these distinguished and very talented and gifted people will discuss. That's the first reason why I want to pay attention. But more than anything else, I write because I want you, each of you, to find yourself, help you to understand what Ralph Gonzalez called our role in this Caribbean civilization. I want to really understand that. So the first reading is going to come from the book Where Mama Stays in Vain. And it's going to come from that story. There are 5 stories in this book. And so here goes. And probably this reflects me. I don't know. Most people think the story is about me. I never lived on an estate in my life. I must admit that. But here goes. So this is the mother talking to her son. Boise, you know, she had said, this house belongs to Mr. Carson, and he could throw us out whenever he wants. And we will have to live on the street, for we'll have no place to go. Mama, you mean that Mr. Carson could tell us to leave, and we have to leave? He asked incredulously. Yes, he can, for he owns this house. But not just this house, all the other houses on the estate. And as a matter of fact, the whole estate. But this is our house. You yourself said so. So how can he come and throw us out? Protested Boise. He can because he only lent it to us. But it is his house. That is unfair. He already has a big house and the whole estate. Why should he have our house as well? It might be unfair, but that's the way it is. And there's nothing we can do about it. Well, Mama, we need to get our own house and move out. Well, that is easier said than done, Boise. But how can he take something that belongs to us? Boise, it doesn't belong to us. And even when things belong to us, people can simply take them and do what they want. And sometimes it is not even someone, but something can take what we have, and we can do nothing about it. What do you mean? Asks a slightly confused Boise. Well, we can, for example, build a house, and as soon as we finish building it, a hurricane or a great storm blows it down. Or we can buy a goat or a sheep, and it falls sick and it's dead. And what can we do? Then we can lose everything we have, Mama. Everything. No, not everything. For whenever you have education, it is yours until you are dead. And no one and nothing can take it from you. It is in your head until you are dead. What do you mean, Mama? Well, you see, I can read and write and spell. And wherever I am on this estate or another, I would still be able to do that. And nothing and no one can take that from me. They can take this house, my job, even my life. But my little bit of education, no one can take. I will die with it. That's the first reading. This second reading is very troubling. Very, very troubling. And I apologize to anyone who this might offend. But it is something that I think this daughter of mine put the thing at the wrong page. I have to find it. This child, you know. Yes, just give me a second, I'll find it, because it is something I must read for you. This child of mine. Okay, just give me a second. Oh, this child has really messed up this thing. Okay, just give me a second. Okay, I think we have found it. Yes, we have found it. Listen carefully, because this is disturbing, but I have to read this for you. Pay attention. As John V. entered the watch house, the memory of the first day was standing in front of him. Yet it was far off, as if having the nature of a spirit. He could virtually see it looking at him all the way from heaven with despise, while still being very present in front of him. He recalled Mali's words of sanction when he, during childhood, would unwillingly admit to some wrong he did and was trying to cover it up. John, she would say, a guilty conscience never lies. You could run, but you can't hide from your conscience. Your sin could find you out sooner or later. Yes, his sins were here now, mocking him most contemptuously. He remembered how she tried to scream, how she tried to fight him off. He remembered when it was all over how much he cried, heartbroken. Now he felt sick to his stomach. Yes, the memories. The memories had become a contemptuous zombie. So he knew he had to do it. The memories that were now facing him in the watch house had not left him alone, not once since that day when Ines had declared most scornfully, all unfair game have to play over. Those memories had woken him up at night, demanding that he face his sins, and so he had to do it. They constantly reminded him that he could hide the truth from everyone in the village, but he couldn't hide from it, for it will pursue him. It would always be with him, and this is why he must do it. He could hear it shouting at him now, "You must do it! You must do it! You must do it!" He bent over and took the yellow jug from under the wooden bench he was sitting on. He opened the jug. Yes, the smell was horrible, so he closed it back. He opened the sack he had brought with him and took out 2 bottles of Jack Iron. The taste of rum was needed because that smell from the yellow jug was horrible. He broke the seal of one of the bottles and put it to his mouth and drank. The alcohol felt very warm, in fact hot in his empty stomach. John V. took up the yellow jug. The smell was still quite sickening. He had to drink some more Jack Iron. He had already drank 1 bottle and had barely started the second one. He put it to his lips and goggled a mouthful. He was smiling and feeling light, real light. He had said a prayer and asked God to forgive him and be kind enough to take him into heaven. God must have heard him, for the zombie had disappeared, and now he felt at peace, internal peace. He took another mouthful of Jack and put the bottle down. Now the hour had come. His hour had come. He raised the yellow jug to his lips. The smell wasn't so bad after all. He swallowed as rapidly as he could, hoping that total and eternal peace would come soon. Yes, eternal peace should come soon. But there was no eternal peace. In less than 2 minutes, there seemed to be 1,000 knives cutting away at his inside. They were cutting and stabbing at the same time. He must get to the bucket and drink some water. He needs some water. He got up and gripped his belly as he staggered to the bucket. Oh God, the bucket empty. I must head for the river. I must reach the river. He staggered to the door, his stomach burning with all the fires of hell. He burst the door open and tried to run to the river. He managed a few drunken, painful steps that took him around the watch house. There he collapsed face down. He began to crawl on his stomach. If only he could get to the river. The water might stop the brutality of the knives. Oh God, help me make it to the river. That's reading number 2. And now the final reading. These are 3 short, very short reading. This is from my latest book that Dr. Gonzalez honored me by doing a profound review when this book was launched earlier this December. And I think I've always said probably he is the only one in this country who appreciates how crazy I am. You know, how crazy my mind is. I have a very crazy mind. I would read 3 very short things, very short. The first is the abstract of the book. Listen carefully, because I think more than anything else, my work reflects where we came from as a people, how we got here, why we got here, but more than anything else, how much we fought to get here and how much we cried to get here. Now, this is the abstract. Listen carefully. Battle the currents of the turbulent seas. Walk the challenging hills without murmur. Drink from the streams so that your tears are refilled. Hide in the valley of calm and always keep climbing to the mountain tops. For living was never meant to be a station, even a comfortable one. No. Living is in fact a continuous journey through seasons and places that make time meaningful. Secondly, this, and probably this epitomizes more than anything else the journey that we took and what it took to take us there. Strength is not always muscles and force. It is often the will and determination to succeed. Strength is not always muscles and force. It is often the will and determination to succeed. I think the building of the international airport is a perfect example of that. Finally, as I said, this is a discussion that deals with feminism, history, religion, everything else. That's why we have these people here today. But we came from somewhere. We didn't just appear here. Dr. Fraser, Dr. Scott, and Dr. Denny explained that in a recent book. We came from somewhere. In other words, there's a history. This is general across the board. The pen should be preferred over the sword, for ink is much cheaper than blood. But truth be told, blood is the ink in which most of history is written, thanks to the sword. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, I'll come to the podium.
Thank you very much, Richard. Next on the program, we'll ask Dr. Cleve Scott to address you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good evening, everyone. Good to see so many familiar faces, and good to see comrade. Hope your driver bring you down here, carry you back home tonight. I'm very happy, and we have something for you, so don't leave. Me and Adrian have something for you. Don't leave. Right? I always do the most important things first. Richard, no disrespect. But it's good to be here, and I would say to you that Richard and I have walked the same road through life. It's funny. We both started life as primary school teachers, went to university, worked with major international organizations, and most Vincentians don't know that. Most Vincentians don't know about their own people. And so the funny thing is that there was a time that me and Richard, we were probably, what we call it, Richard? Spars? In 1983, when the Grenada Revolution fell apart, we were both members of the NYC, and we got engaged in a very philosophical discussion. And for some reason, what I said to him stuck with him throughout his life, for some reason. That here was a guy who and me, we had the same philosophy, but we saw the reality unfolding differently. And so recently, in his last book, what's the name of it, Richard? What's the name of it? On the microphone, Richard. Yeah, on the microphone.
Living in wisdom.
Living in wisdom.
Living in wisdom, an
Make
examination of human nature.
Make sure you buy the book. We're here to sell books, right? Make sure you buy the book. Now, in this book, Richard offers some very short musings. And if you listen to the extract he just read from that text about the jack iron, I'm sure Adrian would tell you the year that event took place in the North Leeward. Many of you probably don't know about it. North Windward, sorry, North Windward. That means you're paying attention. Thank you. Right. Good. So, and it's well recorded. Of course, when we get to the volume in our natural history, we discuss that. Then the history of blood. In the volume 1 of the history we just released, we make the point of every square inch of this territory is a crime scene. And thank heavens we have lived to see the early results from our campaign for reparations, where the UN have said to us, yes, this is a crime scene. And Richard in that musing is inscribing in very clear and precise language of the significance of this, whether we are Portuguese, East Indian, black, white, Chinese. And that's a deep philosophical point. It is so deep that if we don't break it down to many people, would never understand it. And this book, and all of the books that Richard has written, they are steeped in history. And why are they steeped in history? History is the queen of the sciences. Many persons don't know to be a historian. You have to know economics, you have to know politics, you have to know sociology, government. And Comrade will tell you that's really like history. Because it is perhaps very close, the closest to politics. You have to know medicine, you have to know science, you have to know technology, you have to know literature. You have to know all of these things. So that history and philosophy are deeply intertwined. That's why in the university system, almost everybody here who did law. Kisel, you did law at UWI, at Caville? I taught you? No? Everyone has to do a course called Caribbean Civilization. Because deeply embedded in that course is for you to understand what it means for you to be a Caribbean person. It's a deep philosophical point, right? And this is something that more and more writers are unearthing. But what Richard has done, particularly in the last 6, is to expand on a Caribbean philosophy. Because we have Caribbean theology. Most of you know about Cartwright Davis, who is a well-known Anglican bishop and theologian. So Richard, in this book, what he's doing is showing you in a very simple way, moving from giving you the raw material, the stories, into putting it in a philosophical way. That within our Caribbean, within St. Vincent and the Grenadines, we have our own intellectual traditions. If you read the foreword, one of the foreword written by my colleague Andrea Bowman, she speaks about orality. But what Richard has done as a person who worked with the international community, and the advice he took is that we in the Caribbean, we speak too much and don't write enough. And this is what these books are doing. Okay? I'll put it there. I don't want to steal the show, Richard. You know, when they call you university lecturers, you could start up here and talk for hours. So thank you very much for having me here.
Yes, please welcome Mrs. Andrea Bowman to give perspectives on Vincentian literature and feminism in the context of Richard's writing.
Good evening, everyone. I have been asked to speak on Vincentian literature and feminism through the works of Richard Byron-Cox. This topic gives me 2 areas of focus. The first area is the place of Richard Byron-Cox's works in Vincentian literature, specifically his expression of his creative imagination as opposed to his other types of writing, legal, economic, etc. So when I say the place of these works in Vincentian literature, I mean their specific contribution to our Vincentian literary heritage, our literary stock. My second area of focus is the application of feminist literary theory as a construct of literary criticism to these creative works of Professor Byron-Cox. At its most basic, feminist literary analysis asks that we interrogate the presentation of gender, particularly in texts where male authors portray female characters. And my analysis of Richard Byron-Cox's work in this regard will be restricted to these narrow parameters of his specific presentations of the traditional female gender, though even this terminology is not without question. So we begin now with the place of Were Mama's Tears in Vain, 2007, in the pantheon of Vincentian literature. And I invite your contributions to my very limited overview at the end of my presentation. When I first read Mama's Tears in 2020, this text was already 13 years old, and it had already ignited the types of responses and discussions which we anticipate when new creative expressions enter the fields and environment that spawn them. The 5 short stories in Mama are crafted out of St. Vincent and the Grenadines' historical and sociocultural realities, and are presented with the throbbing energy of oral storytelling. My excitement with this text began with the very first short story in the collection, The Dead Man Living with Us. Indeed, the very first words of this story sealed the deal for me, and I quote, "As the laughing began to die down, Tyrone, or Balgo, as we called him, and my siblings realized that my mother had not joined in the fun. In fact, she just sat there and seemed to be in very deep and serious thought as she stared into space. Her quietness was unusual and disturbed us. We expected her to see the funniness of it all. This not being the case, we all stopped laughing, and she, as if returning from some faraway place, partially came back to us. He is right, she said, in a detached yet knowing and profound sort of way. Tony is right. There is an unseen guest living with us in this house. He has always lived here. I was told he lived here long before your father built this house. And I now realize not only that he never left, but that he does not intend to leave." End of quotation. These words introduced and captured for me the exemplary classic Caribbean story to which I want the whole world to be exposed. I was immediately proud that this is a Vincentian production crafted from our Vincentian experience. Let us glance again at its intriguing title, Dead Man Living with Us. The oxymoronic nature of this title embodies the crux of the story. It embodies the crux of our contradictory and often vicious history of conquest, settlement, and colonization. Yet, the story is told with the pulsating energy of a Vincentian cadence, which makes it live and resonate with the ghosts of our Vincentian identities within our Vincentian milieu of then and now. This is what excites me as a teacher of literature. This story and all of the others in this collection lend themselves to the full classical study of this genre of literature, short story. As a result of this, their place in Vincentian literature is earned and validated by what they add to our stock. Is this our only collection of short stories which does this? Probably not. But it goes without saying that this collection is unique, not just because of its specific authorship, but because of the unique epistemology that comprises Professor Byron-Cox's passionate tone. His worldview, his unique responses to his experiences, these all indicate his distinct storytelling genius. These stories are artfully multi-layered, accessible, and they lend themselves to enjoyable critical and literary analysis. The 4 other stories in this collection, When Japhet Met Lucifer, Satu's Pain and Mr. Peniston's Burden, Lord Orator in the Calypso Tent, this one particularly resonates with me, I love Calypso, and the title story, Will Mama Stares in Vain, present the ingredients which contribute to the formation of perspectives in a post-colonial Caribbean. The making of a Vinci identity in the mid-20th century shapes this text. The villages, baysides, Baptist churches, graveyards, rum shops, calypso tents, estate huts, and plantation houses serve as landmarks in the topography of an evolving sociopolitical and cultural landscape. The characters who inhabit these stories tend to be those larger-than-life persons who are yet very familiar to us. Our history is presented as living and walking in the spaces with which we are familiar. Thus, as I said earlier, this text grew out of the fields and environments that spawned it. This is also the case, with the story of Paulene Bramble, Book 1, Springs, Blossoms, and Young Thorns. This 2024 text has been warmly embraced as belonging to us, although Paulene Bramble herself has not yet appeared in it. Pauline Wynne comes into a distinctly Vincentian landscape as a golden child, although her author prefers to have us recognize the oneness of our Caribbean setting and see this as a Caribbean story. This is fine. Though no Vincentian reading the countless stories in the 17 chapters of this massive work could fail to recognize the hills, vales, streets, and beaches of our Vincentian archipelago. As Dr. Jacinth Brown Howard points out in the preface to this novel, and I quote, "Set in one of the smaller islands of the Caribbean, the novel portrays the dichotomous relationship between town and country living from the beginning. This contrast exists in much of the English-speaking Caribbean society in that one generally is expected to come to town, whether it is to better oneself in terms of employment or in relation to education. This dichotomy, traditionally conveyed across marine boundaries, unfolds in the life of Pauline, who embarks on a journey to town as some kind of respite or asylum to escape the abusive relationship in which she resides in her country home." End of quotation. Our Vinci golden child, Pauline, is not only very familiar in our early 20th century context, but our golden children, especially golden girls, are still being born into our society today with the same reception. Listen to this excerpt. "When the midwife announced that it was a girl, Bethel felt that God had forsaken her. He had refused to answer her prayers. She was not a young woman anymore, and Sandy would not be happy at all. Beginning with Judine, the girl children had brought him too much shame, and there was still Iselin and Bernice to go. Now comes another one. This is hell on Jackar's back." The birth of Pauline was soon to change all the doubts and speculations that Bethel had. She was born on a Sunday, and in the Caribbean of that time, a child born on a Sunday was seen as a blessing. The baby was very fair-skinned, even though not as white as Sandy's mother, and was pretty like a brand new button. When the midwife showed the baby to Bethel, she felt a bit of relief, even if she wasn't sure that Sandy would be pleased. But with Pauline looking so much like his mother, whom he all but worshipped, and almost as white, she felt that he might not be too upset with this new baby girl. Sandy heard of the birth of his latest child from a villager while on his way home from the mountain lands. This Sunday, as he got into the village, he was determined to make his way straight home, as he knew he had left the wife not feeling too well, and she could deliver any time, as she is in the 9th month. Sandy boy, me hear you have young bones again. Man, you is a rifle shot like fire night and day. What you saying, Mikey, the picnic born? So you don't know say the picnic born? Man, you don't make joke. You have picnic born and you don't know? Mikey man, me be in bush go change off the animal and them. I now come back. When me left the wife then called Mother John, so me think say she not going to have the picnic today. Man, you is a real shooter, shot evermore. You talking about shot? That is another mouth to feed. But what to do is life that. Man, God make mouth. He go provide bread. Let me go take a drink and celebrate. Sandy and Mikey, joined by some of the other fellas, ended up at Frank's shop, where they drank 2 bottles of rum. By the time Sandy got home, the baby was already asleep. He had to wait until the following morning to see her. He was not ashamed that he was drunk and did not get to see the baby the night before. After all, a man must have a drink sometimes, and what better time than when you're getting your picnic, as he explained to the boys. This might be the last one, and so he had to celebrate fittingly. He was to be completely bowled over the following morning when he beheld a beautiful daughter that God bless me with. Jesus, me almost no believe is my picnic that. She's skin almost as white as Mama Clarice, was his first reaction. Pauline was fairer in complexion than all of Sandy's other children and had real coolie hair. In fact, she looked and reminded him so much of his mother that he right there and then decided that her name would be Clarice. Yes, his last daughter had the right start in life, Sandy thought. Brown skin, good hair, and born on Sunday, the day of the Lord. Papa God had blessed him specially. Finally, he had his special gift. He had his little white angel, and he was going to cherish her. End of quotation. Now, I chose this relatively long excerpt because of the depth of the familiarity of this experience to us all, and the fact that it allows us, as Vincentians, as Caribbean people, to reflect on the indelible roots of colorism in our society. This excerpt also highlights concepts of manhood and male responsibility, and it provides me with a convenient segue to 2 concepts of Professor Byron-Cox's 2025 publication, Living in Wisdom, an Examination of Human Nature. Remember, at this stage, I'm still focusing on the place of Professor Byron-Cox's writings in Vincentian literature and their specific contribution to our Vincentian literary stock. In that last excerpt, Sandy was more or less elevated to heroic status by Mikey because of Sandy's prolific shooting, the number of shots he had fired. And of course, Sandy had to be drunk in celebration of the birth of his golden girl. Now listen to these 2 statements from Living in Wisdom. Number 1, birth happened to you and death will happen to you. Life is your existence between these 2 points. Will you sail or will you drift? Will life also merely happen to you? End of quotation. Statement number 2. We make adjustments when we have people in our lives, be they man, woman, or child. But that must not stop us from living our essence. End of quotation. Professor Byron-Cox tells us that this text is our book because he invites us to reflect on and respond to the singular statements which comprise the text by prompting ourselves with the words, "My reasoning is." It is the professor's hope that on completion of this exercise, we would each have a compendium of our own wisdom, which guides the essence of our living. If we were to extend this privilege to Sandy, a credible representation of a Vincentian Caribbean man of the working class, how could Sandy respond? What would his response tell us, if anything, about race, class, and one's being in our Vincentian context, literary or otherwise? What is the place of the Vincentian working class, the majority of Vincentians, in our Vincentian literary heritage? Sandy is illiterate. Today, the majority of Vincentians are not illiterate. But to what extent do they have access to our country's literary heritage? I turn now to my second area of focus, the application of a measure of feminist literary critical analysis to these texts. Basic Western feminist literary analysis seeks to dislodge the portrayal of women from the largely stereotypical confines of infantilism, patriarchy, patronage, and restricted agency. This may sound like a mouthful when presented in this manner, but this listing is in itself a feature of the very analysis that is taking place. Please bear in mind that this type of literary analysis is not the ubiquitous socio-political feminism of billboards and placards. Accordingly, let us look at the title story from Where Mama Stares in Vain. Mama, the mother of 12-year-old Boise, is first presented to us on the day of her funeral. As they shoveled the sand over her coffin, the tears flowed like a river from Boise. He could not imagine never returning to the one-room galvanized shack and having Mama comb his hair and prepare the cocoa tea which she gave him with a piece of sweet potato or a quarter of dukkana. Sit and watch him eat while she drank her cup of pure hot water. He was thin, but Mama was like a rake. In fact, when Boise first discovered that Mama was dead and called Miss Ruth, the neighbor in the shack next door, to ask for help, when she came and confirmed that Mama was indeed dead, she commented that Mama must have died of starvation. End of quotation. Mama was completely self-sacrificial with regard to Boise. Her love for him denied her the liberty of being hungry, for in situations like those, his contentment could only be had through the sacrifice of hers. Page 217 from Mama. Mama was also reverential to the patriarchal constructs which hemmed her into her world. Her most valuable possessions were her pictures of King George VI, Jesus God, and the administrator of that time. She also relied on patronage. Mama's tin shack and the land on which it stood both belonged to Mr. Carson. He had promised Mama that she could live there as long as she wanted, and if she could find a piece of land to put the shack, then she could take it and move. Mama would really have loved to have her own piece of land and would many times tell Boise that when he becomes a grown man, the first thing he must buy is a piece of land and build a house. She said her father's greatest wish was to have a piece of land, no matter how small, so that he could have knock up something. and move his family out of the Carson estate. But alas, they were too poor for even that. So she was very happy when her sister Maud got married to a man who could take her out of the estate and put her in a house. End of quotation. Mama also, and I quote, remembered an incident around the time when some bad, unreasonable, and ignorant nigger people went and staged a riot at the courthouse in town, and one of them got killed. So given this presentation of Mama, do we have a situation here where our male author has bowed to the stereotypical presentation of an extremely poor Vincentian Caribbean woman of her time? Has Mama been stripped of her feminine agency as a result of a socio-cultural construct? We must note, however, that there is an interesting complexity to Mama, despite her apparent acquiescence to her circumstances. Listen to her thoughts with regard to Blue, the stereotypical estate snitch, and Sam Brown, who may well be Boise's father. Mama couldn't help thinking that this is why she liked Sam Brown as much as she resented Blue. Sam Brown was a man who took decisions he thought were right and didn't care what Mr. Carson or anyone else thought. That is why he had to leave the estate, for he always said that he was a man and not even Mr. Carson could make him behave like a boy. She hoped that Boise would be like that one day and confront even Carson in defense of his manhood in the same way Sam Brown had done. End of quotation. Could it be that Mama had deferred the essence of her being in the hope of her son's eventual redemption? This type of question gels very well with the nuances of the story's title. Were her tears, her suffering, fertilizer for Boise's future? So what may seem like diminished feminine agency may well be an inevitable response to terribly restricted opportunities. Therefore, to apply a feminist literary yardstick, which could tend to be a middle-class instrument, to Mama's space and time may be somewhat unfair, absurd, and anachronistic. Nevertheless, I will end now by applying this same feminist literary analysis to the portrayal of the popular Inez Wooper in the story of Pauline Bramble. We first meet Inez as a self-assured young woman who helps Pauline to get her first job in town. Inez was the head housemaid at King Street Guest House. We meet her a few months after the 1937 rebellion in Kingstown. Inez was 9 years older than the teenage Pauline, who quickly came to regard Inez as her one and only friend in the world. Page 7. It is important to note that whereas Boise's Mama existed on a coconut plantation in the country, there was a vibe of socio-political awareness in Kingstown where Inez lived. This was the town that Mr. Carson of Mama's World did not want any of his workers to go to because stupid nigger people causing trouble in town. This is from Mama, page 223. Inez had migrated to this town from Spring Village as a 17-year-old, following a series of painfully disfiguring incidents which may be seen as having begun with this scene in the watch house in the mountain lands of her home village. And I quote, "She almost jumped out of her skin. There stood John V. He had that same look in his eyes which she had observed for the first time way back as a 10-year-old girl. Suddenly, she understood it. This was the look of a predator who had finally sized up its prey and had now turned into the hunter who knew that the hunted was cornered. There was no escape. Inez instinctively sensed that she was in danger and should try to escape. Run, run, do something, anything, escape. These were commands coming from her head. Alas, there was nowhere to run, for John V. was standing at the door. There was nothing else to do, so she tried to scream. But he was upon her before the sound came out. A teenage girl was no match for a man, strong and robust, from years and years of farm labor. It was rarely a case of no contest. End of quotation. Following this initial encounter, a stillborn baby boy resulted from the series of rapes perpetrated by her stepfather, John V. Therefore, when we read that Inez owed her good fortune of having the 2x4 to a married man named Bertram Cuffey, whom everyone called Ghost, and whose keeper she was for a time. And we read that Pauline says the 2x4 was much, much more than she really expected or imagined. It was made up of a hall and 2 bedrooms and was well put away. This was way beyond what she ever dreamed it would be. And she wondered how a single poor woman like Inez was able to own such a house. When we read these, we have an opportunity to assess Inez's good fortune through the lens of feminist literary theory. As in the case with Mama, we want to ensure that her author has not reduced her to infantilism, and this was certainly not the case. Indeed, Inez had been systematically robbed of her childhood by the burdens of domestic responsibilities which were thrust on her even before her horrendous sexual abuse. What is more, this abuse of Inez's childhood should not be seen as gratuitous drama at the expense of the real lives of real women. The abuse endured by Inez is still too real and still too closeted. So its presentation in this 2024 text as a feature of the first half of our 20th century society is an indictment against the stagnant state of gender abuse in our society. Was Inez's good fortune a result of male patronage and a sense of dependency on her part? The answers to these questions are not straightforward. For although she did receive male patronage, was this receipt indicative of dependency on her part? Does the transactional nature of a relationship absolve it of reductive patronage? Was Inez a subject of sexual imposition in her relationships with Ghost and later Constable Daniel? In both of these cases, Inez exercised her agency in that she very deliberately chose to enter into sexual relationships with them. She entered into these relationships with very specific material outcomes in mind. She achieved these outcomes and reflected thus. Inez had no joy in remembering that she had caused trouble for both Ghost and Daniel, even though neither of them had forsaken her. She felt particularly bad whenever she recalled the look of hate she would see in the eyes of Philbert Daniel, or Philly as she used to call him, whenever he saw her in town after she had made her complaint. She knew she had treated these men wrongly, but it was, them or me or them. Better me do the deceiving. End of quotation. To Inez, men were her enemies. Therefore, feminist arguments which seek to promote female empowerment through male-female equity may seem romantic in the harshness of Inez's world. Consequently, feminist literary analysis brings the authorship face to face with 21st century political correctness versus an authentic portrayal of a particular type of male-female interaction where there is a merging of creativity and lived experiences in the inevitable battle of the sexes. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Andrea, for your very detailed analysis. And next. Reynold, are you ready? Okay, please let's welcome Reynold. Yes.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, good evening. I am brought at the end of a very intriguing discourse from Mrs. Bowman. I am now being asked to talk about religion and the religious air in which we operate. I was told that if you want to be friends with people, don't ever discuss religion and politics. Yet I am being asked to talk about faith and religion to a group of people who just listen to all that tantalizing stories about sex and the rest of it. But I want to take it from the perspective of Richard. And to make this clear, I'm going to take you back 35 years. I'm walking upstairs the post office, and a gentleman from Cuba by the name of Oscar Ramos walks into my office, and he wants to get a signature on a convention so that the convention come into force because they need a minimum number of signatories. There were 3 shy of the number. I said, well, I am not in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I'm no politician, so I can't help you. But I know a rambunctious young man who's a little bit arrogant in his own way too, who would be able to help you. So I found this young man and I said, hey, here's the situation, can you help in this? So yes, I'll do. So the next time Ramos came by, I took him there and the young man helped. Long and short, the convention got signed. I met him and I said, I want to thank you for helping out Oscar with this signature. And we got into an argument, a discourse more or less, on the randomness of orderliness. Randomness of orderliness. And he insisted that randomness was a form of order. But when I look in the dictionary, it says the very first thing about random is disorder. So we both disputed this for quite a while. It didn't end in that day. Fast forward 10 years later, we're sitting in a meeting in Geneva. The same convention that he got the guy to sign on to, he then became a member of the secretariat in that convention. I was representing St. Vincent at the conference. And that conversation started over again. The issue of randomness versus reality. We argue randomness or orderliness. And I'm saying all this to get you know that the idea of religion is always back of his mind. And as we talked, he says, you know, I've been reading all these books on philosophy. And I went back to a little bit of philosophy I did at university, and I realized, philosophy is really the search for wisdom. It's a Greek word, philosophia, which is search for wisdom. And I look at the title, and I remember he's been reading all these philosophy books on wisdom. So he's now growing into wisdom. So he's living in wisdom now. And we had this discourse several times, and this wisdom always prevailed. It's interesting to know that very often Richard and I, and permit me to call him Richard instead of Dr. Cox at this point, for the 5 years, both of us battled Gulak and Juscans and G7 in China. 2 little guys from St. Vincent took on the world for St. Vincent and for the Caribbean. But there was always this backdrop, this line that we can't find, that our belief always clash. He would tell you he has a firm belief in God, but his portrayal didn't seem that way to me. So we always had these little discourse back and forth. The one good thing, though, as I read through his writings, I noticed that he has made reference to the fact that, you know, this Bible that we seem to focus on is self-contradicting. I want to say to you, Richard, if you really took the time to read it the way you wrote this, you would find that there's a golden thread running from Genesis all the way to Revelation. Very consistent. There's no discourse. For example, on page 79, in his book here, he wrote to us, and I was really interested in this one. He's making reference to something from the Bible and says, no preacher, pastor, nor indeed member of the laity has ever followed the commandment given by Christ himself in Matthew 19:21. How does one reconcile that failure with having faith? The reality is that there's no commandment in that verse. The case is there's a young man who approached Jesus, and the question he asked is relevant to all of us. The young man asked Jesus, what must I do to be saved? And that's something we should all be asking ourselves. We don't want to talk about this Christianity and getting saved in public forum, but one day, somewhere, we all have to face that issue. So the young man asked Jesus about it, and Jesus says, well, what does the law say? Honor your mother and your father, do not commit adultery, do not steal. He said, I know all those since I was a little boy. And Jesus says to him, you're lacking one thing. See all that money you have? Just give it away. Sell the things you have. Give them to the poor and come and follow me. He never commanded the man to do anything. In fact, the scripture says the man walked away, and he was very sad. Nobody told him what happened to him. If you look at the life of Solomon, when Solomon encountered Jesus or God in a vision, he says, what do you want? He says, give me wisdom. The response was, you didn't ask for money, you didn't ask for long life, you asked for wisdom, but I'll give you the money and the long life. So nobody yet has measured up to Solomon's wealth. So the days you have money, I could take on the whole rest of that, Richard, but I'm not going to go that way. I want to show something else, though, that I'm interested in. I really found the book very intriguing. I took a course in religion, and the professor was Professor Guy, who was then the pastor of the largest Baptist church in Atlanta. And in that class was a young man from Guyana called Pops Burnham, not prime minister, some distant relative of his. And we were dealing with symbolism. And there was the idea, Jesus, in John 6:54, he says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you can't be my disciple. And the young man said, this is cannibalistic. What kind of religion is this that you're asking people to eat? And he was really firm on that. Now, I had heard some explanations for this from my pastor earlier as a young Christian. So I was expecting this professor, a theologian, to give us some real sound theology that I can walk away with. He said not a word about it. The discourse just went on. But at the end of the course, the last lecture, he says, now young men, I know many of you are leaving this course with less faith than you came. But that's good. You came here with your mother's faith. You came here with your family faith. Now you must find your own. He says, look, you will leave here with a grade on your certificate that says A, B, or C. But that's not the real measurement. If you leave here with all those questions that were raised and all those gaping holes in these discussions and you don't fill them, then you would have failed the course. You need to go out there and find the answers to all these gaping holes in the class that we didn't fill. And I took up Richard's book and I opened and I realized there are a whole lot of gaping holes that we need to fill. We need to fill these gaps. No, and I want to thank him for allowing me to be a co-author. You wouldn't see my name in here as co-author. But it asks, my reason is. And there are more spaces for my reason than there are for his writings. So then I am the co-author. I must now answer these things. And for all of us, if you're going to read this book, you must now fill those gaps. If you fail to do that, you'd have failed. The book would have been useless to you if you don't fill those gaps. It's critical that you fill those gaps where he leaves those things. So, for example, when he talks about this commandment that Jesus gave that he never did, if you don't know and you walk with it, you'll be left babbling, you'll confuse somebody else. You need to find the truth. So I want to appreciate the effort that Richard made, and the way the book was structured. At first, when I looked at it, I'm like, so where's the rest of it? Now I realize I have the greater part to write. And in so doing, I will find the wisdom that he's been living in, that he's been trying to tell me about for a long while. Talk about faith. And what do you consider as faith? I listen to him very often. And we had lots of discussion, like I tell you, for about 5 years. We were constantly battling these issues. Faith and philosophy. He says he was reading philosophy because he believes in philosophy. He's looking for wisdom. Faith and philosophy. They are the intersection between belief, and reason. And although they answer the questions about the origin of God, the problem of evil, and we heard so much evil being discussed in all of his writings, he seemed to have this little love affair with evil that creeps into the back of his book everywhere he writes. You read all of them. I'm not knocking the book in that sense. They're great writings, but I'm just saying there are these little nuggets in there. You have to pick them up. And they're talking about the evil here and the evil there and the ripping here and the murder there. And real life society, right? Real things. But if you're going to answer them, you need some faith, because pure science cannot answer them. You see, we must have faith in order to answer many of these things. Faith is that deep, profound trust in divine truth that distinguishes, it is distinct but not antithetical to profound investigation. Faith is not distinct. I mean, it's not antithesis to this. It's distinct, but it's not opposed to. We often think that you cannot challenge one's Christian faith because you challenge somebody's Christianity and instantly they back up. Too many people are afraid. The Bible does not depend on us for defense. God does not depend on us for defense. The defense is declared. You need to settle this with yourself. So you don't have to back away if someone presents a position that you don't like. And the truth is, the Bible is filled with blood. The Bible is filled with a lot of blood. You can't run away from that. But that's the evil. And science cannot answer that evil. The answer for that must come from a philosophical position. It must come from your faith. It must come from your faith. And faith must be that deep, abiding power within you that drives you forward. The thing that holds you, the thing that anchors you against all the storms of life. So, like we saw with this young man, he says, this cannibalistic religion, when you read one verse, it doesn't make sense. You got to read the rest of it. One other thing I want to say about Richard before I quit here is the idea that we argued a lot about the origin of life, where things begin. And he seemed to, at some time, have some little liking for the quantum vacuum fluctuation theory that says that in a vacuum, there's really not a vacuum. A vacuum really doesn't exist. But in that vacuum, there are particles and antiparticles, and they're constantly in a state of flux. And some gentleman in 2022 tried to prove that. And he said he created a vacuum. And then guess what he did? He pumped a whole lot of energy into it to rip these particles apart, and then he said he began with nothing, and ended up with people. How could you begin with nothing, and end up with all of these gorgeous ladies I see here, these handsome men, these intelligent men, from nothing? And that is what they're saying. The universe started with nothing, and nothing rolled over and became something. I can tell you, it takes a ton more faith to believe that nothing rolls over into something than to believe that my God created all. Which one will you hold on to? Where's your faith? You're going to believe that nothingness, a vacuum, just rolled over and created all of you wonderful people? Wow. Faith, religious faith. Faith in a God that you have not seen. But faith in something, your faith must be something that's experiential. If you miss that, you would miss everything else. If you're depending on my faith or your faith or the other person's faith to carry you through your trouble, it must be experiential. You must have that experience for yourself. And if you don't have that experience, you're going to be in trouble. I can say a lot more here, but I don't think I want to bore you. I want you to go home too and read the book and then fill out the rest, especially on religion. When you do, make sure you have a real Bible. Fill the pages based on that, not based on what is written here. But I want to compliment Richard for the work he has done. We've had a lot of discussion on multiple things he has written over the time, and I really appreciate him and respect him. We both get along. We battle each other all the time, but I have a strong respect for him, and he knows my faith in God. He's not going to try and shift that, right, Richard?
Yes, thank you very much, and please, could you give the panelists another round of applause? Yes, they've brought very different slants to this, and I must say that Dr. Murray has lived up to his responsibility as a clergyman. So at this time, I was asked to give an overview of the proceedings, the events, and I'll be brief. Certainly, there are several things that I want to talk about. A few general things and Richard's work specifically. And I'll be brief in keeping with the time allotted on the program. First, I want to reiterate the sincerest congratulations to Richard. It's very well deserved, and he takes his craft very seriously. The panelists have covered areas that inform Richard's writing, so I will focus on different but related things. I begin with his writing styles based on the 3 novels he presented this evening. He has the gift of mastering different writing styles, and I must add, he is also audacious. I will come back to his audacity later. His ability to communicate in different writing styles is best illustrated with reference to the Book of the Year, and another one, Living in Wisdom, an examination of human nature. In this Book of the Year, it captures a series of dialogues between his characters. For gripping or celebrated work, this is not an easy thing to pull off. Your famous drama or movies hold your attention primarily because of the exchange of dialogues between characters. Richard has the ability to be all of these characters. He's merely changing from one to the next flawlessly. It is the trick that brings stories to life. I will give you an example from Richard's work. Less than a month ago, I had my first serious encounter with him. Unlike Dr. Murray and the others, he's not always been in my life. So this is a very recent encounter. So less than a month ago, I had this encounter. And it was when he read a single paragraph of his book to me. It was an exchange between an elderly gentleman and a young boy at a riverside. The exchange involved a revelation about paternity. At the end, Richard asked me what I thought about the book. Well, I thought long and hard about it because it was very rich in terms of the presentation, and he also brought, because he read it, he also brought a tone to it, which also had meaning. I turned to Richard and asked, "Is this story about you?" He answered with a smile. I must admit, I have absolutely no concept about Richard's genealogy, so it's just what came across. And it was masterly constructed information to be able to convey that sort of thing. And although he hasn't answered me in the definitive, I'm convinced that he was talking about himself. Next, his audaciousness. This is not used in the typical Vincentian cultural context or vernacular, which gives it a meaning along the line of contrariness. My reference in this context is with his book, Living in Wisdom, an examination of human nature. It is not an easy topic to take on unless you're very well grounded and full of confidence. Richard is both. and he will be quick to let you know that he's a scientist. And I hasten to add, because he likes the company of scientists, this is why he's brought me here. And also to say, to specify me by giving me a title, a geneticist. None of the others have been given titles. So he will be quick, as I said, to let you know he's a scientist. And I must add, not in the realm of modern day science, but in the calling of the ancient philosophers, because they were the scientists. The ancient philosophers are the forerunners of modern day scientists. My final word is to laud the St. Vincent and the Grenadines Association of Writers, Artists, and Performers in its work. It is good to see Vincentians honoring their own in a very Vincentian way. I hope their work will stretch the excellence band with other awardees in the forever future. I thank you very much. Next, we will open up the program for your contribution, the audience, and please use the central microphone available. And we also encourage you, if you're making a comment, to be as brief as possible.
Okay, well, good evening to everyone. And today, Honorable Leader of the Opposition, top intellectual in the region, I'd like to say a special welcome here, if I may. Okay, I'm going to restrict, in the interest of time, my commentary to living in wisdom and to congratulate Professor Dr. Cox on a wonderful book. I'll also like to give a push and encourage everyone here tonight to buy a copy. It's a great gift. If you don't need it at your age, I am sure that a young person that you know would appreciate it. So I'm giving a push. But I'm also giving another push. My new book, which came on the 1st of March, is called Along the Way. And I think that Richard's book would make a great handbook to my book. So as soon as Mr. Gaines, and he's right here, as soon as he gets my book, I'm suggesting to him here and now that he can sell one in conjunction with the other. And it also resonates and connects with yet another book that I've written, which should come out at some point. And that is because of the following points, because I'm being very brief. As Richard says in Living in Wisdom, it's not a European understanding of philosophical works. And this is an important point, very important. And in my own writings, I keep saying it's a Caribbean civilization, and even though we all love the glamour and the prestige, or whatever it's called, of writing for the global scene, we should really consider writing for our own people. Like Dr. Carter always says when he comes, he's the, Cleve would correct me, he's the head of the history department at Cave Hill?
Former Dean of Faculty of Humanities.
Dean of, okay, well, whatever. He always says, you Vincentians, you must write about your own people. And it's a great point. Write about your own. So Richard has done an excellent job. In his prologue, he asks, who am I? Why am I here? Questions like that. And I think that a lot of young people in St. Vincent want this type of material. It's silly I went into a lawyer's office one day, a distinguished lawyer in St. Vincent, and I said something about writing, and the first thing he said, of course, I didn't want to be rude, so I didn't respond. He said, "Oh, writing, Vincentians don't read." Now I'm tired hearing that, Vincentians don't read. So let's get out of that negativity. Give people something interesting, something relevant, present it in a readable, accessible fashion, and a lot of them would try to read. I did sampling with the community college students on my book, and it's not that the children don't read, they only want TikTok. That's not entirely so. They all wrote comments to me, called me up, and sent little slips of paper saying that they would like to read more of this material. So all of you writers out there, don't worry about the thing that Vincentians don't read. It's like a diet. If you give them sweetie every day and sweet drink, that's what they're going to call for. If you give them something more sophisticated but accessible, they will bite on it. So there you go. And in closing, I would like to say Richard stressed in Living with Wisdom, let me get the correct title, Living in Wisdom, an examination of human nature. He stresses in it, I would say, to put in dialect, we must learn to live with one another. How are we living our lives? How do we live best with one another? Again, those are points I made in my own writings. And I'd like to leave this with you. Do you know that Harvard, Yale, other prestigious institutions and organizations, I would say maybe post-COVID, but within recent times, and you can all check it out, so I need not detail it. Everybody has access to the internet, you can look it up. They are busily designing courses on what we would say again in dialect, teaching people how to live with one another. So what they're showing is that they recognize that academic qualifications and training certification can't cut it. It ain't cutting it. You have to learn how to welcome the new person to the village, how to take someone new into the fold, and how to live with one another, how to turn away from a contentious situation, how to apply empathy, how to apply compassion, and simply put, how to live with one another. Okay. So I think that's a good note to leave it on and to link it with Richard's marvelous work, and yet congratulate him and encourage him to do more and to focus on our young people in St. Vincent, give them a good reading diet. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Yes, please remember to keep it brief.
I'll cut the number to it.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Edgar Kwame Lewis. I appreciate that we start to write. We're writing material, but I want to suggest that you have a big circle inside the market. And I believe we must bring knowledge to the ordinary people. I believe we should have once a month some kind of book reading in the circle of the market. Because if you come in, come and see, if you want to recognize the consciousness of a society, check the people in the market. You know what I mean? And market people from all over the country. And I believe we must have some more discussion and reading the material and current affairs discussion within the circle to lift the ordinary people intellect. That's all I want to make. But thank you, Mr. Cox. And They have a lot of poet and writers say it, you know, but some of them
He wants to.
down to earth and they need help and they mustn't pigeonhole them. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. King.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, sorry, everyone. I have to be very short because, Richard, I have to run off to attend an online meeting that I'm already late for. But I have to congratulate you on your consistency. And I like reading Richard because he has this attractive style of writing and kind of keep you interested once you're reading. I have not read this one yet. I'm only familiar with War Mama's Tears in Vain and I think Story of Paulene Bramble. But it is all part of us getting to know ourselves. And I think that we have to congratulate you as well as others who have been making this effort to put your thoughts on paper and to share it. And I would want to encourage persons to buy the books, read them, and let us continue to develop our own story as a people. Thank you very much. Sorry I have to leave now.
Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. I first of all want to congratulate and thank the Global Campus and the resident Hefe for all the work which has been done here, and to remind everyone that this site used to be a production locale for cotton ginning and for coconut oil making and soap. So the cotton ginnery here, you know, which evolved into a factory. That's why you see those, the old iron out there, part of it. It was burnt down in 1959. My first year at the grammar school, another century ago. And now we are involved here, not with the production of cottonseed oil, or when cotton was king, with separating it, and having our Sea Island cotton, and coconut oil, and blue soap to wash by the river before we all had pipe-borne water in our homes. We're now producing ideas. It's a locale for the production of ideas, and I think our University of the West Indies, which we, the people, fought for in the anti-colonial struggles of the 1930s, persons who were not, people who didn't even finish primary school, agreed with their leaders that we should have a university. It was established in 1948. It's the only university that I know that arose out of a demand by the people themselves in an anti-colonial setting. So this is a very special institution, and must treasure it. I just want to say that this particular plant, this factory of ideas, is being paid for at least up to November last year by the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I just want to say that. Over $16 million it costs to build. And it's a wonderful thing that we are using it properly. I want to, not to repeat what I said at the launch of Richard's book on wisdom, Reynold, the Book of Wisdom, where you think he got some of his scripture a little wrong. Richard, there have been two traditions of thought. One lodged in ideas, another lodged in materialism. Two particular philosophical tendencies in Western civilization, and much of the writings have coalesced around either one or the other, not necessarily in a mechanistic manner, though some have been so, but more profoundly dialectical. Richard represents none of those particular traditions, but represents a revolt against traditional philosophy. And in that sense, speaks to the essence of human beings and is an existentialist, though existentialism is such a broad school which could involve those which are steeped in belief and faith, like, for instance, Dostoevsky, and of course, those who are more grounded in materialism, like Jean-Paul Sartre, the French philosopher, and perhaps Reynold, in some of the contradictions you're noting about, and his struggle with faith in his writings and belief, I think, is his quest to address at one and the same time this essence of human beings. All of the readings address this essence, something essential to human beings. And he probably may find that traditional Christianity may not provide all his answers. But I like, as the balm of Gilead, to perhaps have a little resolution between two friends by quoting the book of Proverbs. I was it had been drawn to my attention a week or so earlier. I know it, but it had been drawn to my attention, and I think what we have heard from Richard is what he tries to do. You know, the famous chapter 31, the sayings of King Lemuel, an inspired utterance his mother taught him. Not Mama with the tears, but Lemuel's mother. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. I think that's what Richard tries to do. And there are a lot of people who do that without necessarily having Christian faith.
Stick up in, don't go so fast. Don't go so fast. How would you compare that to Gramsci? And Gramsci, Antonio Gramsci, and the subaltern. How would you compare that? Because that's an issue, Richard.
Well, Antonio.
Dr. Gonzalez, just a moment,
Sure.
please. Somebody needs to leave, and somebody's blocking them. What's it? PAB 420. So if somebody here is driving PAB 420, yeah, you have to let someone out. Okay. Yes. Prime Minister, Dr. Gonzalez.
Well, Gramsci is an interesting Marxist. And like all Marxists, they accept that men like Richard and like Reynold and women make history, but only to the extent that the circumstances of history permit them so to make. You do not make history in circumstances created by yourself, but in circumstances inherited from the past and those which have arisen from the contemporary condition. And among the things which have arisen from the contemporary condition and which also come from the past, and particularly those from the past, are ideas in the heads of men and women which oftentimes weigh like a nightmare on the brain of the living. But I think one of the themes which Gramsci sought to address, and Richard addresses it in his work all the time, is the question of alienation, which is a Marxist concept, or at least, well, it's a concept which Marxism has addressed profoundly. Alienation from the very product that you create. Because the product that you create, you do not get the value of what you create. You only get a portion of that value. The rest of the value is kept by somebody called the capitalist. And that you're alienated from the very material thing itself. But I think where then an emphasis in Gramsci and in Richard is the question of self-alienation. Not just alienation from things around you, but self-alienation. And Christ addressed that. To love your neighbor as you love yourself. Of course, one of the problems, if you're alienated from things which you create, and you yourself have self-alienation, because all of us, to one degree or the other, are in exile. And we have to do homecoming. We have to come home to ourselves. You haven't heard me a lot of times when I'm involved in politics. You don't hear this kind of a conversation from me. But it always infused my political work, if you listen carefully enough. But we're in a different setting now, so I speak in these particular terms. Now, and this is part of the battle, always. How do we do this remarkable thing of self-love and love our neighbor as we love ourselves? This is a conundrum which we faced with COVID. Whether we are going to be atomized individuals or whether we are going to be social individuals. Fundamental question. And in the context, there's a, when Richard was talking, I and others too, and Brother Reynold, I think many of you are familiar with Derek Walcott's poem, Love After Love, which was written in 1976. It's a poem about self-discovery. But can you have complete self-discovery, Reynold, without being in communion, in solidarity with others? But he addresses self-discovery here and self-reconciliation, which is a set of the themes you have addressed, Richard, which Gramsci himself tried to address. And Blazer knows this poem well, because Blazer's writings reflect this too. And this is about each of us. The time will come, I'm talking about homecoming, coming out from our places of exile. The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each with a smile at the other's welcome, and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread. Give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows your heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. sit, feast on your life. How do we feast on our life? In our own self-discovery and self-reconciliation, and addressing the issue of our own alienation from ourselves, without we doing it in solidarity with other people, other persons. That's why we come back to this very difficult thing.
Dr. Gonzalez.
Love yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. All of us are on this dangerous road to Jericho. And sometimes the purists want to frighten us to heaven by telling us about hell. But I'm addressing, I believe, something which Richard is seeking to address. And just by the way, I often reflect on this with the help of a poet from Cuba, poet laureate of Cuba, Nicholas Guillen, who wrote a fascinating poem called I Declare Myself an Impure Man. And he ended it by saying that he raised at a lot of people who talked about purity. And then he said, those who are so pure that they do not know what impurity is. And all of these themes come up. This is why I had to be here. I had to come from Goss when I know, even though the state hasn't provided me with security, and I have a lot of things in my head which are secret, including security matters, but anybody can take me out easily. But that's a separate matter of small island politics. When I saw philosophy, history, literature, religion, the feminist dimension, all of it is really one subject. In the same way, all of these things too relate to the human heart and the issue of peace. And it's important when we go to the pump in a couple of weeks' time, we'll understand more profoundly in material terms all what we are talking here tonight. And I just echo the Pope. For those in America who are going at war and praying to God to help them to triumph over the others, the Pope said that God does not listen to the prayer of those who make war. A conversation here tonight which we can seek to resolve philosophically, but each of us has to find the answer in our homecoming from exile on this dangerous road to Jericho. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Dr. Gonzalez. I just wonder, with the permission, with the leave of our moderator, to ask all of you simply this. Have you ever sat down and just thought, as Ms. Ballantyne said, who am I? Why am I here? For what reason am I here? You know, I specifically invited Dr. Morrow because that has been our life. We have had a dialectic approach, a Socratic approach, where we question each other, we wrestle with each other, you understand, but in profound respect for each other. Okay, and that's a fact. And for years, it's not 5 years, it's practically all my life. Well, you're a little bit younger than me, so, you know. But what bothers me is this, and this is fundamental. Look, Dr. Gonzalez read it, Cleve read it, I don't know for sure that Professor read it, right? But I think Reynold may have read it. There's a book by the Martinican doctor of psychology, Frantz Fanon. It is called The Wretches of the Earth. In that book, what really happens is that he discusses the Algerian Civil War. And in that book, he sees patients, you know, patients, people. And these people seem to be crazy, absolutely crazy. And then he spells it out. No, you're not crazy. What is happening here is a civil war. This is a terrifying thing, and you as a normal human being is protesting against it. But because the rest of the society is caught up in it, you seem crazy, right? While all the rest, okay, seem normal. Okay? This is the question. This is the first thing. Now, historically, just two more things. Historically, we know. Let's take Galileo Galilei, right? Galileo Galilei. This is the first man who openly said, look, the earth is not the center of the solar system. It is the sun. You understand what I'm saying? Everything goes around the sun. And he lived the rest of his life under house arrest, right? He had to denounce it, okay? And what we're seeing here, what happens to me, I might sound like a crazy human being, right? And this is why I had Reynold here in particular and Her Excellency here, because I know they would challenge me. I was the one who asked that she speak of feminism. I asked for it. Because what she says is absolutely true. This is a man trying to write about women. Now, this is madness, isn't it? And I wanted to hear what she had to say about it. But I know Reynold was going to sweep the floor with me tonight. You understand? The point is this. We live in a society. All of us. Some of us are Portuguese, some of us, I don't know what. But somewhere along the line, we have to have the common thread. And it begins here. This is my understanding. I could be very, very wrong. But this is my understanding. This is why my last book is called, if you open it, you'd see, this is your book. And as Reynold said, I leave all of these spaces for you to tell me, not only what you think, but to dispute me, to say what you have said is absolute nonsense. But guess what happens? It completes the book. Your idea, my idea, completes the theory. This is the point. You understand? And until we are ready to do this, until we are ready to disagree, so that we could have a discourse, right, which then forms the conversation, right, then we ain't really going anywhere. Last thing, the former Prime Minister said this, that this is a place of what? Ideas. This is where ideas are created, where ideas are born, okay, in this country. It was once a cotton gin and all that sort of stuff, right? But now, we are creating ideas. One of the poems he always mentioned is Danny Williams, or the senator. And Danny says this, only the future is ours to desecrate, right? Are we going to desecrate it, or are we going to find the ideas? What I'm trying to say is this. The last book in particular, all of my books are like that, but the last book in particular asks you to do what? Examine yourselves. Live the examined life. That is what we have to do. At least that is what I think.
Richard, if you permit me, Chair, for completion, just half a minute. Persons would be listening on the broadcast, and they may feel that they're alienated from all this discussion and about books. I just want to say this, that resident in our community is discussion which goes on all the time about these very matters, not necessarily within the categories which we have discussed them. People seeking to find answers and find their own selves. That's what the altar call is about in one respect. But there are other things too. And to make this point to the persons who are listening, you don't need to be writing books to reflect on these things or to make profound statements on them, because in my growing up, there are lots of people who influenced me with very profound thoughts. Ordinary people, farmers, migrants from Cuba, and so on and so forth, Panama. And to make this factual point, that two of the most important individuals in the history of Western civilization, and in fact, Reynold will say, and I will say to the most important one, Jesus Christ. But two I mentioned who never wrote a line, Socrates and Christ. They both spoke. And nowadays, with telecommunications, what we have, while some of us would write, some of us can talk a lot of sense. But we have to make sure that we talk sense, not the gibberish that we get, because it may end you up worse than what is happening to Meta and Google at the moment in California and New Mexico. Thank you.
We'll just take one more if somebody is really burning to speak.
Yeah, we have Philip.
Good night, everyone. Panelist, Dr. Cox, good night. I'll be very brief. Well, first of all, I would like to congratulate Dr. Cox on the recent launching of his Living in Wisdom, an examination of human nature. In reading the literature so far, I have encountered that this book offers very, very, very deep, thrombotic almost, levels of self-reflection, in introspection, and self-reconciliation. I would like to encourage all of those here tonight, if you have not gotten yourself a copy, to purchase a copy of this text. I have already purchased 2 other copies for the rest of my family members. And as well, Dr. Cox, sometime in the near future, I would like to implore you to pursue the creation of, or the possibility of creating a multidimensional medium whereby, whether digital or not, persons can, they can reply to, or you can, they can add or upload their replies to, or the responses to all the questions and all of the verses that you've put in your book. I think that it would offer a reservoir of various responses and experiences from everyone else, which we can all draw upon to inspire each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'd just like to congratulate Richard on his range of books, really. But it seemed to me that it's important also, at the same time, when we talk about books, to talk positively about them, somebody has to start to also talk critically as well, because you can't always be positive. And so I'm taking the responsibility, the job, just to mention just one thing. In terms of a lot of the focus of the work, the impression I have, and a lot of the discussion has been around the concept of the importance of Caribbean civilization. And while I recognize the importance of that, I would also say that if one is talking about civilization, the other side of civilization, of course, is wilderness. And we tend not to talk about wilderness. And I wanted just to throw out the idea that perhaps that aspect might also be something worth considering in the future.
He's modest, but I think he should speak to the book that he has written on that. No. But not, he wouldn't say no, but I just want to say that there is a book written by him from the perspective of quote-unquote, the wilderness.
Yeah. Okay. Very short.
Good afternoon.
Good night.
My name is Sheridan Senshu, Byron-Cox Senshu. I'm Richard's first cousin. I'm going to quote you about the audacity of Richard's writing. Like a true Byron-Cox, he has the audacity to tread where no others go and where others fare to. And in the true manner of a Byron-Cox, he literally exposes all the good, the bad, and the ugly of Caribbean living in such a manner that he holds you in so spellbound that although you're shocked at what you're reading, you feel as though you have to go on. You have to finish it. Is it going to be a cliffhanger? How is it going to end? What are we going to find in this story? And that is what really makes a true author and someone who you have to be able to hold your reader in this sphere of what's happening, intense tenseness, and so on, which he does. And in all of his books, they all deal with, as I said, the good, the bad, the ugly of society, Caribbean life, whatever. But if we really look at it properly, we're talking about a lot about self-love and, self-searching and recognizing who you are as a human being and as a person. But sometimes many are afraid to do any self-searching because the good and the bad and the ugly are part of their makeup, part of the pattern of their life, and trying to tear those apart to find out who you are and to love yourself may cause a lot of, I would call, latent trauma, and that you will be revisiting your trauma if that occurred. And so it's very difficult sometimes for people to find themselves, and they may take years to do so, and whereas others may take a shorter time if they go into therapy and things like that. And with that, I say thank you, Richard. You have your true Byron-Cox. You keep them going.
All right. I just want to read a few lines from the final book, Richard.
Yes, Living in Wisdom, an examination of human nature.
Right. And Richard asked me to write the prologue, the foreword. And a lot of what was said tonight, I know it's captured in his line. And Richard, you will help me read it too.
Which line do you want me to read?
From here.
Okay. In the prologue, Byron-Cox confesses of his motivation to think big and ask big questions. Long before him, the Vinci writer and editor Ord Coombs, 1939 to 1984, who had relocated to New York in the late civil rights era, wrote in an article entitled A Place Like Home, published in Black World/Negro Digest in December 1971. As I know now, as I sit at the water's edge and look on the blackness of the river, that one can find order within the chaos of this dazzling city, since the center that one seeks lies as always within oneself.
Thank you, Richard. You could imagine being in Germany and thinking about St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Thank you very much, Chair, for your leniency.
Yes. Thank you all very much for coming out in very large numbers. I think Richard is thoroughly satisfied with your turnout. Just two announcements. One to say is that there's a small refreshments prepared for you downstairs, and then to turn over to Richard for the final word.
Good afternoon, good evening, sorry again. And firstly, I must say, as Dr. Gonzalez has said, it was a great honor to be hosted here at this global campus, and it's really well kept. It's a beautiful place in every sense of the word, and it's really something that we St. Vincent and the Grenadines can be proud of. So I think we should show some appreciation to Madam and her team, right? There are many people here. I want to thank all of you, but there are just a few things I want to say which I think are important. Professor O'Garro and Dr. Cleve Scott and Dr. Philip Nanton all came from Barbados for this exercise. Could you please give them a round of applause? Right? Yes, they came all the way from Barbados for this exercise. I want to thank the panelists. They did what I expected. Cleve did not challenge me much, but but I expected Dr. Murray to sweep the floor with me, which he did, and I expected Ambassador Bowman to deal specifically with the question of feminism and how we see this, because I think there are serious problems in this country and in our Caribbean which we need to address in one way or the other, and we still haven't done so. I am a man, I'm not a woman, but I'm not blind, to what happens here. So that's the thing. Also, there are people here who, without them, this could not have been done. They did a lot of work. Anthony, where's Anthony Denny? I don't even see that man. Right, but Anthony Denny played a significant role. There's Miss Lydia Pope here who did yeoman work in helping me to get some of this done. There are those who promoted this thing, Miss J. James, and I want to make very, very special the thank yous I want to give to the Metrocin General Insurance. Could you please stand? All right, Miss Desiree Richards, and the Kingston Cooperative Credit Union. Could you please stand, sir? Right. Yes, none of this is cheap, and without their part support, it would have been much more difficult for me to do. Also, I must make special mention of a very special person, Ambassador Inga Ronda King. Ambassador, could you stand so that our people can see who you are? Our Ambassador par excellence, and also two other ambassadors, Ambassador John and his wife. Could you please stand, please? All right. These are the people who helped to write what I call the golden age of foreign policy in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So I really want to thank all of you, every single one of you. I made it my business to issue special invitations. That's how special you all are to me. And without you, this exercise could not have been what it was. Yes, you would have to pay for the books, right? But you're getting them signed by the author. We have some lovely wine, red wine, white wine, and so on, cheese downstairs. So please, before you go, let's meet downstairs. When you have bought your book, right? Let's meet downstairs. But thank you again and again, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Goodbye.